Human life lasts only a single breath. No, you didn't mishear. That was the answer that silenced an entire monastery. And maybe, just maybe, it's the question that might stop you in your tracks today. If this were the last day you could hear one piece of advice, what would it be? Write it down for your future self. Someday, years from now, you'll thank this moment. So take a deep breath, and let's begin the 17 timeless stories passed down by ancient sages. Stories not just to listen to, but to live by. Story 1. The Rough Jade. Once, a young man believed himself to be exceptionally talented, yet after graduation, he encountered roadblock after roadblock, struggling endlessly to find a fulfilling job. He felt as if he had mastered many skills, but life just wasn't giving him the chance to shine. Even when he did get opportunities, no one seemed to recognize his worth. Over time, he became disappointed with society, disheartened by rejection and failure. In his despair, he began to feel that no bull, the one who knows horses, existed to recognize him as a 1,000-mile steed. Lost and in pain, he wandered aimlessly until one day he reached the seashore. There, intending to end his life, he was stopped by an old man who happened to pass by. "Why are you trying to end your life?" the old man asked. The young man replied bitterly, "No one understands me. I am wasted talent. No one values what I have to offer." The old man bent down and picked up a small pebble, then tossed it into a gravel patch. "Could you find the exact pebble I just threw?" he asked. "That's impossible," the young man responded. Without a word, the old man took a radiant piece of jade from his pocket and tossed it into the same patch of gravel. "Can you find this jade for me?" "Of course," said the young man instantly. The old man looked at him deeply and said, "Then now you understand. Right now, you are not yet the jade. That is why people don't recognize you. If you want others to value you, you must first become that piece of jade." The young man stood in silence, his gaze cast downward. He turned and walked away, reflecting on the meaning of life and the value of self-cultivation. You see, a rough jade at first glance is indistinguishable from an ordinary stone. Its beauty only emerges after polishing. Just like us, every person has talent, but without hardship, without failure, and without refinement, how can we expect our true worth to shine? Life is precious. If we go through it without understanding our purpose, then we're no different from blades of grass, blooming in spring, withering in winter. And remember, greatness is born not in ease, but in adversity. As the ancients said, great heroes are forged through great trials. Story 2. The Blessing of the Boat. One day, Shakyamuni Buddha and his disciples came upon a mighty river. The current was fierce, churning as though it could devour anything in its path. The Buddha picked up a large stone by the riverbank and asked, "If I throw this into the river, will it float or sink?" The disciples exchanged puzzled glances. "Master," they said, "of course it will sink. It's a stone." The Buddha sighed gently. "Then this stone, it has no good karma." The disciples were confused. How could a stone have karma, let alone good or bad? With a calm smile, the Buddha said, "Let me tell you a story. There once was a stone, 3 feet wide. It crossed the river not by floating on its own, but because it was placed on a great boat. The boat carried it across safely. Not even a drop of water touched it. Do you see? That stone had found its good karma, its wholesome connection. That boat was the karma. In life, the Buddha continued, we are all like stones. Alone we may sink, but when we find the right support, a wise teacher, a noble path, we can cross even the fiercest rivers. The disciples were awakened by his words. Indeed, a boulder may be heavy, but it can still float if it rests upon the right boat. So too in life, no matter how difficult our journey, if we find good company, righteous guidance, and stay aligned with truth, we will reach the other shore. Story 3. Confucius on Conduct. Once, Master Confucius sat with his students to discuss how one should conduct themselves in life. Zilu said, if someone treats me with kindness, I will return kindness. If they treat me poorly, I will do the same. Confucius responded, that way of thinking reflects a lack of ethics. It is the mindset of a savage, not a gentleman. Zigong then said, if someone treats me with kindness, I'll respond kindly. If they treat me poorly, I will try to lead them toward virtue. Confucius nodded. This is the way of friends. Then Yan Hui said, whether someone treats me well or not, I will always respond with kindness and try to guide them. Confucius smiled warmly. This is how one should treat family. And if you could extend that spirit to everyone under heaven, that would be the true embodiment of benevolence. Before Zilu departed for an assignment, he asked Confucius for parting words. The master said, never stop striving for excellence. Don't measure others with calculation or insincerity. Be genuine. Be trustworthy. Be humble. These 5 things, effort, sincerity, honesty, humility, and care, will take you far in life. Years passed. When Confucius visited the land Zilu governed, he marveled at the fertile fields, the orderly homes, the peaceful streets. He praised Zilu 3 times. In the countryside, Confucius said, I see discipline and prosperity. That is due to his diligence and trustworthiness. In the town, he added, I see harmony and kindness, because he rules with justice and generosity. At the court, he concluded, I see wisdom and decisiveness. His leadership is both clear and compassionate. Thus, the master said, even though I have praised him 3 times, it still does not fully honor all he has done. Story 4. Tattered clothes, not a tattered soul. One day, the great philosopher Zhuangzi met the king of Wei. Zhuangzi's clothes were threadbare, his sandals tied with hemp rope. The king looked at him and said, Master, your life seems to be one of poverty and misery. Zhuangzi replied slowly, Poverty? Perhaps, but misery, no. You see, poverty is merely the absence of material wealth. Misery, however, is the torment of the heart, the suffering born of attachment to appearances, to status, to validation. Many suffer not because they lack, but because they cannot bear to lack. They ache under the gaze of others, under the complaints of loved ones who don't understand. Their sorrow is not in the body, but in the mind. The wise, however, see through it. Just as a monkey jumps freely through the lush forest, but struggles in dry, thorny branches, we too are bound by our environment. Even a skilled archer cannot hit a target when the wind is against him. Zhuangzi teaches us, do not confuse poverty with suffering. The truly wise do not rely on the wealth of the world for happiness. They find freedom in the spirit, not in the silk they wear. Even in hard times, especially in hard times, the value of one's soul shines clearest. A sage born in the wrong time may not prosper, but they never betray their integrity. And perhaps the true poverty lies not in lacking things, but in a king who cannot recognize wisdom when it stands before him in simple clothes. Story 5. Greed is the deadliest poison. In a year of terrible drought, the villagers were starving. Crops failed. People dug wild roots, chewed leaves, drank whatever water they could find. Death loomed over every doorstep. Then one day, a wandering monk arrived. Seeing the suffering, he quietly told a young man, "In the eastern woods, beneath the old poplar tree with cracked bark, lies a small mound. Dig there. You will find a jar filled with millet grain. But listen, take only one scoop and only at night." The young man followed the directions under the moonlight. Sure enough, he uncovered a pot glowing with golden millet. He took one scoop and covered the pot again. That single scoop fed his ailing mother. Day by day, she regained strength. Soon, word of the miraculous jar spread. Villagers came in the night, one by one, each taking only a scoop. The village survived, but not all hearts were grateful. Old Man Me, known for his greed, brought his 2 strapping sons. They came not for a scoop, but to take the entire jar. They dug and dug, deeper and deeper, chasing the bottom of the pot. Yet the more they dug, the deeper the jar seemed to sink into the earth. They could never reach it. As dawn approached, they scrambled to fill their sacks with what they had collected. But on the way home, something strange happened. The bags grew heavier and heavier. By the time they reached home and opened them, they found sand. Nothing but sand. From that day on, the jar was never seen again. The people whispered, "It was a gift from the heavens, a test of virtue. For the honest and the kind, it gave life. But for the greedy, it vanished." Greed does not just harm others, it devours the one who clutches it most. Story 6. It is never too late to do good. Zenkai was once the son of a samurai, a man of privilege and status. But blinded by desire, he committed a terrible deed. He killed his master and fled with the man's wife. He thought he could build a life with her, but she revealed herself to be selfish and cruel. Disillusioned and broken, Zenkai left her and wandered far away, begging to survive. Tormented by guilt, he decided to atone for his past, not with words, but with action. In a dangerous, remote mountain pass where travelers often perished, he began to carve a road through solid rock. By day, he begged. By night, he dug. Year after year, for 30 years. Then one day, the son of the man he had killed tracked him down, sword in hand, seeking vengeance. Zenkai bowed deeply. "I deserve death," he said, "but let me finish this road. When it is done, take my life." The young man agreed and waited. But days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Eventually, he joined Zenkai in digging, fueled by silent rage. But something changed. Through sweat and silence, anger melted. The young man came to admire the depth of Zenkai's remorse, his endurance, his resolve. When the road was finally complete, Zenkai once again knelt and offered his life. The young man lifted him up and wept. "How can I take the life of the man who has become my teacher?" This story reminds us to err is human, but to persist in wrongdoing is damnation. Redemption is real for those who truly repent. And forgiveness, born of shared suffering, may turn even enemies into allies. Story 7. What makes a virtuous ruler? One day, Duke Ai of Lu asked Confucius, "Among today's rulers, who is the most virtuous?" Confucius responded, "Duke Ling of Wei." The Duke was surprised. "But I heard his private life was chaotic and immoral." Confucius nodded calmly. "I speak of his governance, not his personal indulgences." Confucius then described how Duke Ling surrounded himself with talented, ethical ministers, his wise brother Zhu Mo, his trusted counselor Wang Lin, who used his own wealth to support overlooked talents, and Qing Su, a strategist who managed state affairs flawlessly. When another sage, Shi Shu, left the state in protest, the Duke grieved for 3 whole months. Only when Shi Shu returned did he resume joy and celebration. From this, Confucius concluded, "A ruler who reveres the wise, honors the loyal, and mourns the virtuous is indeed a ruler of great moral standing." In another discussion, Confucius was asked by Zigong, "Do the dead retain consciousness?" Confucius replied with wisdom rather than certainty. "If I said yes, the filial may cling too long to the dead. If I said no, the unfilial might discard the deceased without care. Best to live honorably now, and discover the truth yourself when the time comes." And when asked about his students, Confucius noted, "Zixia will grow, Zigong perhaps not. Zixia surrounds himself with those better than him. Zigong prefers those beneath him. That is the difference." Indeed, the actions of a true gentleman are rarely understood by the common crowd. Like the sage who quietly resigns from a position not out of anger, but to avoid exposing the faults of a misguided king. The wise speak through conduct, not complaint. Story 8. The true measure of a person. A young man once visited a great Zen master and asked, "Some call me a genius destined for greatness. Others say I'm a fool who will amount to nothing. Who am I really?" The master smiled and asked, "What do you think of yourself?" The young man was silent. He had never really asked himself that question, so the master gave an example. Take 1 kilogram of rice. To a housewife, it makes a few bowls of rice. To a farmer, it's worth a modest price. To a rice cake seller, it becomes a product. To a seasoning manufacturer, it's refined into something greater. And to a master brewer, it becomes fine wine worth hundreds of thousands. Same rice, the master said, yet its value changes depending on how it's used and by whom. You, he continued, are like that rice. People will praise or criticize you, but their words don't define your worth. Only you can do that. Your value depends on how you cultivate and refine yourself. Awakened, the young man bowed deeply and left with firm steps, confidence restored. Yes, we all start from similar beginnings, naked, unknowing, fragile. Some are born into wealth, others into hardship. But the true worth of a person lies not in their starting point, but in their character and perseverance. To recognize your own potential, polish your talent, follow your passion, and live with integrity. That is the path to true greatness. Your value is not what others see in you. It's what you choose to become. Story 9. Anger has no place in the dictionary of the wise. They say still waters run deep, and slow speech is the mark of the wise. Anger, you see, is not a show of strength, but of weakness. I once had a friend, a brilliant woman. One day, her boss called her in and suggested she might not be fit for the company. She left crushed. At home, she quarreled with her husband, fumed at her children, and eventually, in a burst of anger, she quit. When I asked her, "Did it ever occur to you that perhaps the problem lies within?" she snapped back, "What problem? I work, I cook, I clean, I do everything, and no one understands me." But as we talked, I realized her suffering stemmed not from others, but from her inability to pause, reflect, and breathe. Hot tempers chase away blessings. They blind us to kindness. They poison our homes. Even the simplest acts, like greeting a neighbor, become impossible for those ruled by resentment. In our old neighborhood, two elderly women lived very different lives. One was serene, gentle, always smiling. Everyone admired her grace and peace. The other, always scowling, blaming children, resenting neighbors. Even her own family kept their distance. She lived in loneliness, bitterness her only companion. You see, life is rarely easy. There will always be reasons to be upset. But how we face them, that's our choice. True intelligence lies not in outwitting others, but in mastering ourselves. A wise person doesn't waste breath on rage. They use it to understand, to forgive, to grow. Because in the end, a peaceful mind is a powerful one. Story 10. The wisdom of letting go. A disciple once asked a Zen master, "Master, what does it mean to truly let go?" The master replied gently, "To let go is to no longer dwell on the past, to no longer cling to those who've left, to stop blaming yourself for what you couldn't achieve, and to cease longing for what was never yours." Letting go is not weakness, it is responsibility for yourself, for others, and above all, it is wisdom. Life is uncertain, unpredictable. So when something comes to you, treasure it. When it leaves, release it with grace. Learn to walk forward, unburdened by regret. A peaceful heart is one that stops comparing, because comparison is the thief of joy. Measure yourself only against who you were yesterday, not against others. The master then told a story. There was once a man who fished every day by the river. Each time he caught a fish, he would measure it with a ruler. If it was longer than the ruler, he'd toss it back. Someone asked him, "Why do you throw the big ones back? Everyone wants the biggest catch." He smiled and replied, "Because my cooking pot is only as wide as this ruler. A bigger fish wouldn't fit." This is the spirit of letting go, knowing what is enough, resisting the pull of endless desire. Just like plum blossoms need not envy the grandeur of peonies, the moon need not compete with the sun. Each has its own beauty. The master then asked, "How long do you think a human life lasts?" One student answered, "Several decades." Another said, "Like the cycle of seasons." A third guessed, "Perhaps a single day." But one student quietly said, "Just as long as a single breath." The master smiled. Yes, a human life is only as long as the breath you're taking now. Cherish it. Story 11. One immortal game, 100 years past. In both Eastern and Western cultures, there are old tales of time slipping by differently in the realms of gods and mortals. One of the most famous Chinese stories is that of the immortal game of Go. During the Tang Dynasty, the poet Liu Yuxi, demoted for decades, met the great poet Bai Juyi in Yangzhou. They drank and reminisced about the days that had slipped away. In one of his poems, Liu Yuxi referenced the old legend of the woodcutter Wang Ji. Long ago, Wang Ji went into the mountains to chop wood. Deep in the tranquil forest, he stumbled upon an old man and a boy playing the game of Go beside a stream. Entranced by their game, he set down his axe and watched. Time passed. How much? He didn't know. Finally, the boy looked up and said, "It's time for you to return." Wang Ji reached for his axe and was stunned. The handle had rotted. The blade rusted through. He rushed back to his village only to find everything changed. No one recognized him. The elders told him that Wang Ji had vanished into the mountains 100 years ago. To him, it was the span of a single game. To the world, an entire century. So fleeting is time. So delicate is life. Let us not squander it. Story 12. A Life Rewritten. There's a saying, to err is human, but to recognize and correct those errors, that is virtue. One such man was Huang Fu Mi, a brilliant scholar, physician, and historian of ancient China. But he wasn't always that way. In his youth, Huang Fu Mi was undisciplined, aimless. At age 20, he had no understanding of history, philosophy, or literature. One day, he brought a melon to his adoptive mother. She wept. "You've wasted your years," she said. "You've given nothing to your future. Do you call this being a good son?" Her words shook him. From that day on, he changed. He began reading tirelessly, even while resting from farm work. Over time, his will hardened. His spirit calmed. At 26, he began to write, not for fame, but to uplift others. He compiled histories, biographies, and medical texts. He praised those who held to virtue over wealth and power. He encouraged people to resist temptation and hold fast to their values. But perhaps his greatest gift was to medicine. He authored the classic of acupuncture, describing 349 acupoints, how they relate to the human body, and even how music and emotion affect health. Though many famous doctors came before him, Huang Fu Mi is still revered as the father of acupuncture, and despite fame, he lived simply. He refused court appointments, preferring the life of a scholar. In a letter to the emperor, he wrote, "A true ruler listens to truth, not flattery. Let me dedicate my life to writing and healing. That is how I best serve." So he read, he studied, he healed. Until his final days. He once said, "To hear truth in the morning and die by night, that is enough." And indeed, his life was more than enough. Story 13. Starting over. The ancient sages once said, "To err is human, but to correct one's errors, that is divine." One such man was Huang Fu Mi, a brilliant mind from ancient China, but he wasn't always that way. In his youth, Huang Fu Mi was a wanderer, aimless and uninterested in learning. At age 20, he had no understanding of history, philosophy, or ethics. One day, he brought a sweet melon to his adoptive mother. She didn't smile. Instead, she wept. "You're 20 now," she said, "but you know nothing of the world. You've wasted your time. If you want to honor me, then study, learn, become someone of worth." Her words pierced him deeply. From that day forward, he never stopped reading. He studied in the fields by firelight, in rest. And over time, his passion grew into wisdom. By age 26, he began to write history, ethics, medicine. He wrote to elevate others, to preserve virtue. He praised those who resisted greed and power, and he poured his soul into healing. His acupuncture classic detailed 349 meridian points and showed how emotions and music affect the organs. Today, it's still revered. Though emperors sought him, he declined power. He preferred a quiet life of purpose. When asked why he worked so hard, he answered, "To hear truth at dawn and die by dusk, that is enough." And in truth, he lived a life of deep purpose. Story 14. The Girl by the Stream. While traveling with his disciples, Confucius reached the southern hills of the ancient state of Chu. There, by a gentle stream, they saw a young woman washing clothes, graceful, composed, wearing a jade ornament. Curious about the customs of the region, Confucius sent his student Zigong to speak with her. Zigong approached with a cup and said, "Miss, we are travelers and I'm very thirsty. May I trouble you for a drink of water?" The girl replied calmly, "Sir, the stream flows clearly whether observed or not. Its waters reach the sea regardless of watchers. If you wish to drink, help yourself." She took the cup, scooped water and poured it out, then scooped again, this time with the flow, not against it, and placed the full cup on the sand. "According to propriety," she said, "men and women do not touch hands. Please, take it yourself." Zigong returned and told Confucius, who smiled. "Ah, she understands ceremony and propriety." Then Confucius gave Zigong a stringless guqin and sent him again. Zigong said, "Your words earlier were like a refreshing breeze. Might you help tune this instrument?" She bowed slightly. "I am just a village girl, uneducated in music. I fear I cannot." Again, Zigong returned. Again, Confucius nodded. She knows humility. Finally, Confucius gave him 5 bolts of coarse cloth. Zigong offered them as a gift. The girl refused. "Though poor, I cannot take what is not earned. Please leave, before gossip arises." This time, Confucius stood and said, "She is not only wise and polite, but truly virtuous, a flower in full bloom, unseen in the wilderness." Story 15. The Great Fool. Sometimes, the wisest people appear the most foolish. There was once a boy in America named Winston. In his town, the other kids often played a joke on him. They'd offer him a choice: one shiny 5-cent coin or a dull $1 bill. Every time Winston picked the 5 cents, they laughed. "He doesn't know the difference." Even the teachers noticed. One day, a teacher pulled Winston aside and asked, "Don't you know the dollar is worth more?" Winston replied, "Of course I do. But if I took the dollar, they'd stop offering me the choice. As long as I take the 5 cents, they keep bringing money." That foolish boy, He became Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States. Wisdom, it turns out, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, disguised. True intelligence isn't about outsmarting others. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to advance and when to let go. Like the scholar Fu Bi, who, when insulted in the street, calmly said, "Perhaps he's speaking to someone with the same name." His peace disarmed anger, or like the wise boatman, who tricked a proud scholar into humility with a riddle and a smile. Sometimes it takes more wisdom to pretend not to know than to prove you do. So be like the fool who sees the world, yet chooses kindness over pride. That, perhaps, is the highest form of intelligence. Story 16. The Dangers of Boasting. The ancient sages warned, "Those who boast invite their own downfall." Confucius once sighed, "People who spend all day chatting nonsense and showing off petty wit rarely amount to anything." One story, told by the philosopher Liu Zongyuan, speaks of a hunter in the state of Chu. He had little skill, but loved to show off. He made a bamboo flute that mimicked the cries of wild animals. With it, he lured deer and goats. But one day, imitating a fawn's cry, he attracted a leopard. Panicking, he blew the call of a tiger, scaring the leopard off, only to bring an actual tiger near. In terror, he imitated a bear's roar, driving the tiger away, only to summon a massive bear. Out of tricks, he froze. The bear mauled him to death. He died not from nature, but from his own cleverness. Elsewhere, a scholar on a boat boasted he knew everything. A ferryman challenged him, "What weighs 1,000 pounds underwater, but only 10 on land?" The scholar failed. The ferryman revealed he didn't know the answer either, and took the scholar's money for the riddle. The scholar was humbled. Sometimes the wisest words are spoken by the simplest mouths. In life, 3 things are best kept quiet: your wealth, flaunting it attracts envy; your happiness, it may highlight another's pain; your knowledge, the truly wise need no stage. Real wisdom lies not in what we show, but in what we choose not to. Story 17. When the mind is troubled. Open this bag, life, it is chaotic. People misunderstand you. Dreams slip away. Loved ones leave. In those moments, open the bag of wisdom and remember this. Even Chow Chow, often hated, had close friends. Even the noble Liu Bei had bitter enemies. Don't live by others' judgments. Stay true to what's right in your heart. What's yours will always find its way back. What isn't, no matter how hard you chase it, will never stay. Some people are not meant to walk with you forever. Some feelings will never find closure. Accept it. That's what makes life both beautiful and bittersweet. Time is like a net. You catch what you cast. Let go of what isn't yours. Smile through the tears. Don't pour your pain into people who'll turn it into gossip. Love, too, is like sand. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Let others breathe. And in doing so, you'll free yourself. When things go wrong, don't shout at the sky. Don't blame fate. Just breathe. Keep walking. One day, you'll see. What once felt like the end was only a bend in the road. When the world is noisy, be the quiet. When others rush, take slow, thoughtful steps. When envy stirs, smile and let it pass. The tree doesn't envy the grass. The moon doesn't compete with the sun. As age ripens, so too does your soul. You'll learn that not everything deserves your energy. Sit still. Read. Brew tea. Talk less. Feel more. Don't chase applause. Don't fear the silence. The most beautiful symphony plays inside a quiet heart. And when your mind is troubled again, remember, you've walked storms before, you've risen from sorrow, and you are still here.